Bramble, and I am so excited to be at this conference. I hope y'all have been having just as much fun as I have, and I think next year I'm gonna make a Code Beam bingo card that's gonna include, oh wow, I didn't know you could do that with AI. Jenny Bramble has introduced herself to you more than twice, and 2 people working on the same niche technology who haven't met yet. If you've got more ideas for the bingo card, let a girl know. So, like I said, my name's Jenny Bramble. I have too many cats, too many rabbits, too many quail, and a concerning number of plants, according to my sister. I am also fascinated by humans. I got into software because, well, I could get health insurance, but also because it helped humans be a little bit different, a little bit better, a little bit stranger. Right now, I am the director of engineering at a company called Papa. And I don't usually do this, but I am going to talk a little bit about our mission and vision because I think it sets the stage for this keynote. We are a healthcare adjacent company that is trying to create a new kind of care built on human connection. Taking humans, bringing them together, and making sure that seniors in particular can stay in their homes longer and not have to go to nursing homes. A world where no one has to go it alone. So this is not a theoretical keynote. This is not a keynote where I'm like, here's a grand idea that no one will ever do. This is something that I live every day because I work with 2 very vulnerable populations. The first being seniors with low support systems, and the second being gig economy workers. So, I make software for humans. I help software come into being for humans. And I want to start with a story about an app called Vocable. So, Vocable AAC is an app for people who can't speak. And I've talked to a couple of you about this because it really had a profound impact on me the first time I worked on this. It was originally designed for paralyzed people, but anyone that doesn't communicate verbally can use this app. You control it by moving your head around, and that little orange dot jumps around to whatever thing it wants to say, and then the app says it. So, I was working on this, and I was doing my thing, my little happy testing thing, and everything was going great. We were going to release a minor package upgrade, and minor package upgrades never go terribly, ever. After the release, I was checking the stats, and there were 9 crashes. 9 crashes, that's a lot of crashes. So I looked a little deeper. Oh, that's just one guy. It's one user on an Android phone, and Android is so fragmented anyway that it probably doesn't really matter. Like it's some guy with some weird phone somewhere, so, oh well. But what does a crash mean if it takes away your voice? This person that was trying to use the app was trying to use it because they couldn't speak, they couldn't communicate. They were in a place where this app was the way they communicated. So as I'm looking at these crashes, I'm not just saying, oh, it's a crash for a person. I'm saying this person's voice can no longer be heard. So I spent a lot of time fixing that. Humans are fundamental to software development. Yep, that's right. Day 2 of the conference, and we're doing a software development theory keynote. Humans are the reason we make software. They are the reason that we have jobs. They are the reason that we're here today. Without humans, we have no reason to make software. And the behaviors that we accept in the software, the things that we say, yes, this is how it works, this is how we're thinking about it, this is what we're testing, those behaviors shape the future, and they shape who can be included in that future. I'm going to go into that very deeply in a moment. So because we build software for humans, human experience must impact the software we build. We want to build software that thinks about people, that thinks about their experience, that says, this is why we're doing this is what we're creating. This is the kind of world that we want to live in, that we want our friends to live in, our kids to live in. We are designing that whole cloth. I call this the human factor of software. It's not just about computers, it's not just about technology, it is about the people that we are servicing through our software. 3 things I want to talk about. Every line of code affects a human. Be intentional about your edge cases. And then we're going to talk a lot about building empathy because, like Quinn said, empathy is kind of my thing. Let's start with every line of code affects a human. I say this all the time. Every line of code that we write, everything we push out to production, we need to have a reason for it. It should be changing our software, it should be changing the way that people interact with our software, and it should have an impact on the world around us. We hope that impact is good. Sometimes it is not, and then we go back and fix it, hopefully. First thing here is we create software to change the world. We don't just make the tippity taps because it's fun. Well, maybe we do a little bit. But we create software because we want to make a change in the things that people are experiencing. Everything you put out there changes your code. Everything you put out there changes the application that you're writing. Nothing that you release to production has no effect. Even if it's, just a package upgrade, it changes something. It changes the world. I want to be very clear about this. I want to stress this so hard. We are making magic. We are bringing into being things that have never existed before. We are whole cloth creating ways for people to interact with each other, to interact with software, to do things that have never even been thought of in some cases. What? That's incredible. The fact that we can build these monuments to human progression in code is amazing. It is so powerful to think that you, everyone in this audience, has that impact on the world. And if you're like, oh no, not me, step back. Think about what you released most recently. You absolutely have that kind of impact. And I'm not just talking about AI, machine learning, or whatever buzzword we've got going on today. 20 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to send my mom a picture of my cat stuck in a Rubbermaid tub. I wouldn't have been able to get a ride to the airport from rural North Carolina without calling people on the phone. Like, oof, actually talking to somebody on the phone, terrible. If I wanted to help my dad sort his vintage sci-fi novels, I would have to drive to his house to do that. And now we can hop on Zoom and go through his vintage sci-fi novels. We are changing the landscape of humanity with every line of code we release. And I will stand by that statement forever. My dad retired recently. He now refers to himself as a professional musician. He's from a small town in North Carolina. Before the internet, his ability to play shows was very limited to the space he currently was physically in. Maybe if a friend of a friend of a friend knew a guy, he could get a gig in Morehead City, but he's going to be in New Bern for his whole life. Now I can put together an EPK, an electronic press kit, submit it to any festival in the country, and maybe my dad can play something in New York. That'd be pretty cool. This would not have been an opportunity he had before we created it. So cool. The next element of this is humans are going to start relying on your software in ways you don't expect. We're creating magic. We're creating something that's never been here before, and humans are like, I like that thing. That's my thing now. Who hates social media? Yeah. Spoiler alert, I don't. Some technology stores our collective memories. My husband died 7 years ago. Every couple of days, Facebook reminds me of the beautiful relationship that he and I had, where beautiful relationship includes a strong disagreement about the movie Cable Guy, the McRib, which is food, and hip hop. Although, I'll listen to Bahamadia and 9 once in a while. Without Facebook, without this store of memories, my access to that memorial, to this relationship that we had, is completely different. And one of the things that people struggle with a lot on Facebook is Facebook pages of people who have passed on getting hacked. Because maybe you don't have access to it, maybe you don't have their password or whatever. And now suddenly, your loved one's memorial page is trying to sell somebody Ray-Ban sunglasses. And that is so painful. Facebook has done a little bit to get better about that, but still, it's a thing. If I lose access to his Facebook page, I lose access to kind of the day-to-day of our relationship, of the way we went about doing things. So it's not just about minions, memes, and conspiracy theories. There is a repository of memory there that I would lose if I lost Facebook. And that's kind of heavy, not gonna lie. So we're gonna skip over that for a little bit because, it's a little bit heavy. The last thing is technology is the future. So every line of code affects a human. We create software to change the world. Humans are gonna rely on that software in ways that are new, interesting, and wonderful. And technology is the future. I assume most of y'all in here work with technology and you're like, yeah, technology is the future. Love that stuff. This is a quote that I heard about 5 years ago from Ash Coleman, and it impacted me so strongly that I have been trying to get them to keynote my conference ever since. Ash is a non-binary black person and said this around the time facial recognition software stopped seeing people of color. If technology is the future and technology cannot see me, what does that say about my place in the future? If we are saying that technology is the future, that we are creating the future whole cloth, but we're saying some people can't be part of that, ouch. We're saying they can't be part of the future. They can't be part of what we're building, and that is terrifying. And I'm sure you're like, oh, well, it's okay, we fixed that. The facial recognition software definitely sees people now. Yeah, it's not the only place. If you have non-white skin, you may actually have a lot of trouble washing your hands. Non-white skin is not recognized as easily by automatic sinks, automatic soap dispensers, automatic towel dispensers. Hand washing is a fundamental, basic part of hygiene. It is a basic part of the human experience. And we're saying a subsection of humanity doesn't get to do that. Like, sorry, you don't get to wash your hands. Ouch. That's not okay. So as we are building this future, as we are wholesale cloth building this future, we need to think, who are we building for? Are we building for people that look like us? Are we building for people that think like us, act like us, believe like us? Or are we building it for everybody? One of the things I struggle with is I'm educated. Is that a humble brag? Yeah, I went to college. A lot of the people that I work with did not. A lot of the people in the gig economy user group didn't go to college. Maybe they're in high school, maybe they're just not interested. So when I'm approaching something from a college-educated perspective, I may not be thinking about everyone. So I need to step back and say, what about people that aren't just like me? And we're gonna talk a lot about empathy here in a sec, y'all. It's gonna be so good. So if technology is the future and can't see me, what does that mean? This also applies to people with what we typically classify as disabilities. So differing abilities in sight, in hearing, in motor control, all of these things impact how we need to interact with the software and technology. If we don't build with everyone in mind, we are literally saying these people do not get to be in the future we're creating. I have a friend who's in a wheelchair. There is a goth club that I really like to go to in North Carolina that's upstairs. There's no ability for him to get upstairs unless we pick him up and carry him upstairs. So the club is saying, sorry, Rob, you don't get to come see Solemn Shapes unless someone picks you up like a child and carries you upstairs. That's awful. We are doing that with software today. We are saying, because this isn't accessible, because we don't have the beeps whenever you change screens so that blind people can use your software, you don't get to use it. So as we're building software, as we're thinking about what we want to look like, what we want the future to look like, think about who we want to include in that future and specifically include them. Whew. With all that, let's talk about edge cases. Oh yeah, y'all. Secret tester at the developer conference. We're gonna talk about testing. Someone locked the door so no one can get out. First thing I wanna say is edge cases are artificial. Thanks, man, you're the real one. We get to decide what we care about when we're creating software. And someone's immediately gonna be like, no, my product person does that. Okay, but that shouldn't be how it works. As a team, we get to decide what we care about. As a developer, you get to write the software, and as you're writing it, you say, What am I writing? Am I going through the acceptance criteria? Am I thinking about what that acceptance criteria means? Am I going through the happy path? Am I going through the alternative path? I don't say negative path or sad path. I say alternative because it's just as valid. If you've ever said, but why would they do that? And have your tester respond back, because you let them. That was me. That was my spirit coming through the tester. Edge cases are made up. We decide what we care about when creating, testing, building, releasing software. It looks like this. This is everything the software could do. This is what we decide to test. And we can make that as big or as small as we want. We get to say where the edges are. They're completely artificial, completely made up, and we get to decide. So we want to be intentional. As we're saying what we're going to test, what we're going to think about, what we're going to build, what paths are important, we need to be intentional. We don't want to just say, do the easiest thing, do the obvious thing. Really think about where you want to draw that line, and if there's something you don't want users to do, don't let them. Disable a button. Don't give that option. It's fine. Restrict their ability to do the things you don't want them to do, and put in safeguards. Which leads me to be explicit about what you are or are not building, what you are and are not testing. Don't assume we're all on the same page unless you say it out loud. This happens to me a lot. It's actually why I missed a couple of talks yesterday. I forgot to give the right context to people, and they're like, we're going to do the thing you told us not to. Please don't do the thing I told you not to. I told you not to do it. So with this intentionality, with this creation of edge cases and this thought process comes documentation. If you don't write it down, it doesn't exist. I do come from a testing background, and one of my biggest strengths is looking at our assumptions and bringing them to light. What are we assuming about this software? What are we assuming about our users? What are we assuming they're going to do? How are we assuming they're going to use it? And is that right? I want you to think about the happy path. Think about the alternative path. And if it isn't something that I'm going to include in my testing, I want to state that explicitly. Because sometimes if I say it out loud, other people are going to have context that I didn't, and things are going to be a little bit better. The other thing about this, when you explicitly say something like, we are not going to test accessibility, a little bit of name and shame. If you say something like, we are not going to make sure that this group of people can use this software, someone's going to be like, oh, wow, I am embarrassed that you said that out loud, and I don't like it. And you'll find that there's actually some extra time to put accessibility in, because no one wants to say, I'm excluding this group of people. Says the girl that excluded a group of people because she's working on an admin tool. If you do have a very constrained group of users and you know exactly what they look like, it could be fine. But still, call it out. Make sure that people understand that this is something important to us. Final element of this is adapt to new information. No software survives contact with your end users. As soon as you put it out there, something changes. One of the classic QA jokes is a QA engineer walks into a bar, orders a beer, orders 14 beers, orders a lizard. A real customer walks into the bar, asks where the bathroom is, and the whole thing explodes. People are going to change how you think about software. At one point, I asked my dad to send me a screenshot, and it came in a Word document. And him walking me through the process of how the screenshot got printed into a PDF, which he imported into Word. And I'm like, Dad, please stop talking. You were going to think this is incredibly intuitive. Obviously, it works just like this. And then Commander, that is not how chairs work. Humans shape our software. We want them to change our software. We don't want to put out an immovable rock, an immovable wall that users throw themselves against. We want to have something malleable, something that whenever somebody interacts with it, it has the ability to change. Your features need to change with the way people interact with them, or stop letting them interact with it like that. Like, those are your two options, really. we don't want to have immovable software. We don't want to have things that don't change. Everything needs to be able to look at the world around it and say, how could this be different? How could this be better? Because we are creating that future. We are making a future, and if we make it too rigid, we're not going to include everybody. And that is a major theme of this talk, is inclusivity. And sometimes a small feature becomes your business model. Flickr. Everybody knows Flickr, right? The photo sharing thing. Originally, the chat and photo sharing aspects were part of a massively multiplayer online game called Game Never Ending. Anyway, Game Never Ending never got released because we don't hard code in names like that, because then our games don't get released. They realized that the photo sharing and the chat were so much more viable than the actual game, and now I can wander around the internet and look at sunsets from any country in the world I want to. Game Never Ending ended, Flickr has not. Build, learn, adapt. Do not forget that last piece, or the middle piece. Don't just build. Building is so much fun. Like, I love building things. It is so satisfying right down to my toes to make something awesome and put it out there. But if it's too precious, if I put it out there and I can't learn and adapt, I'm not making good software. I'm just building for building. Build, learn, adapt. What I'm saying is, don't throw software over the wall to production. Once the software leaves our hands, a lot of times we're like, okay, whew, we're done. Time to build the next thing. Let's go, go, go. No. Don't throw the software over the wall. Don't throw it over the wall to your testers, and don't throw it over the wall to production. Pay attention to it. Watch it. What were you aiming to change? What behaviors were you trying to change? What metrics were you trying to move? What impact were you trying to have on the world that you want to see on production? Look for it. See if it's there. And if it's not there, see what else is there. And then figure out what you could have done differently, or what you shouldn't have done, or throw it away and start over. No one likes it when I say that. Sorry, y'all. Okay, buckle up, y'all. It's empathy time. My entire software career is about empathy. Empathy isn't something that comes naturally to me, believe it or not. I love people, but whew, y'all are hard. Like empathy. Empathy is so difficult for a lot of people. So what is empathy? It is the ability to sense other people's emotions and imagine what they might be thinking or feeling. A lot of people get into computers because you put X in and you get Y out, unless you're doing floating point math. But we all have the capacity to have empathy, or to fake it pretty well. And you might be thinking, oh man, this is so hard, I don't want to do that. I'm like, sorry, y'all, that's the keynote. Not everybody leans naturally into this, so give yourself a little bit of grace. We're going to go through a couple of empathy building exercises, and how do we fake empathy? How do we get this out there? Because it might not just be you. It might be the people around you also need to be able to step into this mindset and build better software. The first thing is believe people's lived experiences. You remember when I mentioned my late husband? Oh yeah, this guy. Look at him and his weird gothy wife. That twinge you may have felt was empathy. If you saw that picture, if you heard my story where I said this man that was a fundamental part of my life for 10 years is no longer around, that twinge is empathy. Congratulations, hooray! If you didn't have that sense, if you were like, things happen to another person, woo, also fine. I do invite you at some point to step into that experience, to put yourself in my shoes. Not right now, we have a lot more Keynote to get through. But later, step into it and say, what would it feel like if this was something that happened to me? How would I respond? Would I be able to stand up in front of hundreds of my closest friends and say that? Yikes. Maybe not. I purposely put words he wrote and a picture of him up because this makes him more real. It makes my experience a little bit more real, which helps you kind of lean into that empathetic moment. Whew, okay, enough of that. Because if you don't have it, I want you to fake it. And a lot of times we say, fake it until you make it. I feel like that puts a lot of pressure on people to make it. You don't have to make it. All you have to do is fake it. There you go, Jenny Bramble. Don't have to make it. It's not going to happen for everyone. A lot of people are never going to be able to immediately say, yes, I had an empathetic response there. Yes, I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing here, how that person is feeling. You're not always going to do that, and that's fine. Make yourself a checklist. As you're doing your pre-deploy stuff, as you're doing a PR, be like, did I empathy? Yes or no? You just have to fake it. You do not have to make it. You just have to fake it. Okay, so this whole next section is for folks that struggle with remembering other people are real, or have friends, coworkers, loved ones who struggle with remembering other people are real. And I do want to stress this is okay. A lot of people are neurospicy. A lot of people just don't do this well. And there's a ton of people at work who sometimes I will say something like, well, what if I didn't have thumbs? And they're like, why wouldn't you have thumbs? Because sometimes people don't have thumbs, okay? I do recommend you work on it. I do recommend that you bring an empathetic practice into your software development practice, because it will make you a better technologist, and it will make the world that we are creating, the future that we are crafting, a better future. And maybe at some point, everyone can wash their hands. I'm just gonna harp on that for a while because it blows my mind. Okay. First off, make your users real by picturing them. Like I said before, I showed you a picture of Christian. I showed you some words that he wrote. I gave you some of his dumb opinions about the stupid McRib. That makes him more real than just a nebulous human. So if I'm just like, user, that doesn't mean anything. That could be anyone. That could be anyone's user. So I'll go a little deeper. I'll say, okay, a lot of this particular user is an older woman. She lives alone. She really likes cats and bookstores. She doesn't have a good support system. Okay, a little bit more fleshed out, a little bit more real. But what if I did a little bit better? Because humans do really great with pictures, less great with abstract concepts. This is Maria Lopez. She's 87 years old. She really likes Lipton tea because I guess she has no taste. But now she's a real person. Now she is someone that looks like she could exist. And you can look at it, and whenever you're building something, you can imagine this sweet older lady using your software. You could imagine specifically helping her. When I first joined my company, one of the stories that every company has a mythology, right? Every company has oral traditions. One of our mythologies is Otis. Otis is the oldest person that uses Papa, my company's software, and he doesn't have a support system. At one point, he was on the phone with one of our agents, and he mentioned that it was his birthday next week, and he hadn't seen his kids for a year or something. So we sent someone to his house with a birthday cake because he had never had someone care enough, like in the past few years, to really celebrate his birthday. Now, he cried, of course. Obviously, everyone cries, right? But the impact that we had on Otis makes you look at the software and say, oh my gosh, we are actually doing something. We are changing this person's life specifically. We are changing Maria's life specifically. Whenever I am talking about something that we've done at work, I will say something like, thank you so much for fixing this bug, Nathaniel. Because you fixed this bug, Alejandro can get to his doctor's appointment. Because we changed how this works, now Valley can do something better on our admin tool. Using people's specific names and specific actions that they want to take that we have allowed them to take makes our users more real. And that's incredibly important for having empathy. The other thing is feelings are real, even if they don't represent objective reality. I do not care if it works on your machine. Not everybody's going to be using your machine, and it doesn't work on mine. Take people's statements at face value. If they say they feel something, believe they feel it. Even if you think, well, that shouldn't be how they feel, you don't get to decide that. None of us get to decide that. They have a feeling, you need to believe that feeling is real. You may not understand it, But everybody is a crazy jumble of experiences and emotions and feelings and thoughts and opinions, and you may not understand that crazy jumble, but believe it is real. Believe it is how they feel and how they interact with the world. I don't have ADHD or autism, no matter what my psychologist says, but I do manage a lot of folks who identify as one or both. I cannot drag these poor souls into a 3-hour meeting and have that be at all successful. For me, pretty neurotypical. I will sit in a 3-hour meeting and have the time of my life. Your girl loves a meeting. No, I say seriously, I love a meeting. But no one else on my team is gonna be successful at that. So as I am setting up our day, as I am looking through what we're doing, I need to be thinking not necessarily what works for Jenny and Bramble, but what works for this team. What works for their differing experiences, and how can I protect them from the 3-hour meeting that people keep putting on the calendar? Mostly by messaging that person and saying, no, try again. Also provide an agenda or no one will show up. I can't operate with them like I would operate with me. And when I'm building software, when we're thinking about software, not everybody's going to interact with it like I'm going to interact with it. So I need to remember their feelings are real. Their objective reality is real. Their subjective reality is real, even if it's not objective reality. Once you get this in your brain, it'll change your life, I promise. Because if their feelings and experiences are real, what else changes? Here's where you stop and start doing the actual work. If I couldn't see, how would I interact with the world? Like, if I couldn't see right now, I would be holding very still because that looks dangerous. For y'all watching online, there is like a 3-foot drop there that I don't want to fall off. If I am frustrated with something, how does that change how I interact with things? If you've ever been to the self-checkout when you're a little bit tipsy, it gets a lot harder to use. It's like, I just want some bananas, y'all. What if people aren't at their best? So here's a simple way to practice stepping into someone else's experience. If you drink alcohol, imagine you do not. What if you wanted to go out with 100 of your closest friends and have an experience, but alcohol is not something you can interact with? Medical reasons, religious reasons, doesn't matter. What are your options now? It's Coke or LaCroix. Are you having the same kind of experience? No, you're having something very different. Like Quinn mentioned, I'm highly allergic to crickets. Also shellfish, like that's where that came from, and eggs and citrus. Imagine you have to go through the world being allergic to lemons, oranges, limes, pineapples, kiwis. How does that change your experience? How does that change what you order at a restaurant? How does that change what restaurants you can go to? And I don't know if y'all realize this, but almost every cleaner is lemon scented. So occasionally I will walk into a room and be like, oh wow, I really miss breathing. Nice that the room's clean, but So stepping into these experiences will really help you start building empathy with people. And to bring it back to technology, use the software like they would. I've done a lot of mobile testing in my life. If you have ever set your phone into accessibility mode and turned the screen off, like turn the darkness all the way down, it is very eye-opening. Everything becomes so much more difficult. And there's a lot of ways that blind people interact with software that seeing folks don't understand. So by breaking it down like that, you can really change your experience. Even if you're not working on a mobile app, just doing that will help you step into that person's experience. I mentioned vocable earlier. I'm not paralyzed. I don't have problems talking. Y'all may not have noticed, but like, I'm pretty good at talking. So how did I step into that experience? The lead software developer and I sat on either sides of a wall so we couldn't see each other and tried to have a conversation with Vocable. It was so hard. Oh my gosh. I was just trying to tell him about my day and it took us so long to actually get through that conversation. It was kind of crazy. But it really gave me a lot of empathy for my users. I've mentioned it a couple of times, I'm in rural North Carolina. I was on DSL until a couple of months ago, and now I have Starlink. So, thanks, Elon. I was not able to use Zoom like my coworkers were. A lot of times when we have software that works because you're connected to the internet, it assumes you have a good connection. And I had a terrible connection. I live in a log cabin. Like, moving a couple of feet away from my router changes my internet connection. My experience of the internet was incredibly different from everyone around me. So grab Charles Proxy, dial your internet connection down to dial-up, and see how you now experience the internet. Welcome to rural North Carolina. Hooray. This is hard. I want to be incredibly clear that building empathy, leaning into this, recognizing that we're not just creating software, we're creating a future. We are creating the ability for people to do things that they've never done before, and our responsibility to do that ethically and kindly is hard. Humans are my favorite thing ever. I just love, I would have been in tech support my entire life if it paid well, and it does not. And even I step back sometimes and I'm like, oh, right. Left-handed people exist. Right, got it. People that have different color abilities exist. At one point, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, we decided to make our staging environment a different color than production so that we could know the difference. And of course, obviously, we're going to go with red, right, so that you know you're on staging. Four of my developers are red-green colorblind. They literally could not see the difference between staging and production. That was really embarrassing for me. Whenever you're in a spreadsheet, and especially when I'm working with our ops team, they'll color code stuff, and I'll be like, hey, half the people in this room cannot tell what you've just color coded. Do better. So the more you do it, the easier it becomes, the more natural it becomes. Empathy is the ability to sense other people's emotions and imagine what they may be thinking or feeling. Again, we don't have to be able to naturally do this. We don't have to just be able to step right into that experience and be like, yes, I understand all of humanity. We just have to fake it. Just have to be able to do it a little bit. Because if we do it a little bit once, we're going to do it a little bit twice. We're going to make the world just a little bit better, and that's what we're really, really looking for. Picture your users. Names, images, other details that turn them from faceless entities into real people. Be careful, PII, PHI exists. So sometimes you don't want to say, this is Maria Lopez, her Humana ID is blah, 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 but say, hey, this is Maria. This is what she's like. This is a random fact about her that will cause a connection. Remember that experiences and feelings are real. Your exercise here is imagine you're allergic to citrus. Don't drink alcohol or don't have use of your right hand. If you have to do everything with your left hand, your sleeves are going to get so wet because you're going to try and reach for something and you're going to activate the automatic soap dispenser or the automatic sink and you're going to get water all over you. It's so fun. It's not fun. And finally, use the software like they would. Turn off your screens. Use Charles Proxy to dial down your internet connection. Do something that makes your software less easy for you to use in a way that's realistic for your users. Another favorite of mine is don't use your mouse. If you're on a website and you have to tab through the whole gosh darned thing to get to where you want to go, you're going to be like, wow, the tab order on this is awful, and it's so hard. And it will really change how you experience the internet. And that's my goal, is to change how y'all experience the internet, experience software, experience your lives. Because every line of code affects a human. Everything we write, everything we do affects a human being. If it doesn't, then don't write it. Don't do it. And even if it's you, maybe you're writing it so you're better at something. That affects a human. It works. Because every line of code affects a human, be intentional about your edge cases. Make sure that you are thinking about the humans you're affecting, and you're affecting them in a positive, ethical, good way, and the way you want to affect them. And build empathy so that you can be intentional about your edge cases, so that you can step back and remember every line of code as a person, so that we can build this crazy, amazing, beautiful future that includes everyone. Let's build software for humans. Let's embrace this human factor. Let's make sure that what we're building is what we want to build. That the future we are creating is the future that is going to include everyone and is going to make our world that much better. Let's embrace this human factor. Thank you. Questions? Comments? And please do not forget to rate the talks. Please put Q&A questions in. Whenever a conference organizer looks to see what conference talks we're going to put in a conference, we look at that stuff. So if you like this, if you don't like this, your opinion can affect the world. But questions, comments? Anyone got anything?
Thank you so much. That was amazing. There's no questions in the app, but if anyone here has any, I can run a mic over to you. I'll start with one then. That was awesome. I've spent most of my career at startups, and something that I've often experienced and that I've heard echoed by basically everyone else I've ever spoken to in similar spaces is that they might be aware of ways in which their software is insufficient or not accessible, but they aren't able to navigate actually getting buy-in to prioritize those features because of under-resourcing or whatever. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice on navigating that? It sucks knowing that your code's not good enough, but that you don't know how to fix that.
Be explicit. So yes, a lot of times you're going to have a moment where you can't, for whatever reason, increase the accessibility or make a feature that's going to make this even better. You do have to make that trade-off. You do have to make that choice. But make it a choice and not something you just fall into. Make sure that you're saying, we are not going to be putting in this accessible feature. We are not going to be building this. We are not going to be doing that. Say it out loud, document it, write it down so that if later it comes back and bites you, you can be like, this is a choice we made. This is not an accident. That takes bravery because it can be hard to be the one that says, we are doing this, we are not doing that. But if we document it, if we say it specifically, then we start to think about it as we're building stuff, and we start to say, this should have been important. How can we make this important? The most important thing is to take that flashlight and to shine it on all the dark places. Make sure that you're explicitly describing what you are and are not testing. Does that answer it?
Absolutely answers it. Thank you.
Thank you for that talk, Jenny. So it strikes me that, especially in the medical space, and I guess a lot of spaces, people are increasingly interacting with GPTs and not necessarily people. What do we do about that, about injecting humanity into this process?
Man, I don't know. I think one of the main things that we have to do when we start embracing new technologies is asking how it's going to affect, how we want it to affect the people. So we use a lot of chatbots at work, and people hate them. They hate them so much. It's like the elevators. I hate the elevators. As soon as I get in the elevator, I'm trapped in the elevator. I've already made all the decisions I can make. And a lot of times, things like that feel that way. It feels like you've trapped them into a way that they cannot make any choices other than what you've given them. So talk to your users, ask them, what don't you like about what we're using? What don't you like about the things that we're doing? And start to build a mental model for yourself of what your people want and how we can move a little bit closer to that. Does that kind of answer your question? Thank you. You're welcome.
So we've got one in the app now.
Thanks,
says,
people in the app.
Clearly, the answer will ultimately be it depends on how good or evil a company actually is. What kind of strategies do you suggest for getting folks that are looking much more at the pure profit-loss ratio? How empathy for a wider range of users deserves resources? it seems the answer is always, well, that's only some small percentage of possible users, so no, it's not worth it, I think they mean.
Quit your job. We always have the ability to inject empathy in. Even if you're in a purely profit-based company, as an individual person, you have some power. Like when you look at the election system, you're like, well, it's just one person voting. But you're voting for something that's important to you, and if you vote that way, and you champion for that, then other people are gonna start to come along with you. It is so hard in a big company. I worked at an advertising place for a long time, and don't know if you know this, advertising, not particularly ethical. But I could sit there and say, hey, the thing that we're about to do, the thing we're about to release is super hella unethical. Maybe we don't do that. And even if they still released it, even if I still felt like I had to test it, somebody said it out loud. Just by saying it, just by being someone that is known as an ethical person, as an empathetic person, it can start changing the people around you. You're never gonna change the entire company, but maybe you can change your next door neighbor. Maybe you can change your team. Maybe you can change your boss, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And sometimes you can't. Like sometimes you legitimately cannot do the right thing at the company you're at. And the option there is quit your job. Go somewhere that you can feel good about working, that you can feel good about doing something. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about money. It's not just about buying a catamaran as a tax shelter in the Virgin Islands. It's about creating something good and putting good software out there. Sure, if you don't do it, someone else will. That's their ethical quandary. It doesn't have to be yours.
Amazing, thank you so much. If there's one small question, we have time for it, but you've got one?
Yes. When did you get into the Elixir community? When did you start? When did you join the community?
Okay, so fun fact, I'm a tester. I don't code. I was actually working at that advertising agency, and one of my coworkers got completely disillusioned with the unethical advertising agency. And he goes, I learned about this thing called Elixir. It's awesome. I love it. And I'm like, that is so cute for you. And he ended up quitting right before I did to go work at a company that was doing Elixir, even more unethically. Yeah. And just really fell in love with the language. And then he moved on to another company, and finally came to Papa. And he said, Jenny, we are building a startup in Elixir, like this beautiful language that I love so much. And because I'm ground floor, we can create a healthy engineering environment. And I'm like, that is so cute for you. Let me know when the checks clear consistently, and maybe I'll talk to you. Because I don't do startups. I do not do startups, y'all. But he kept talking about it. Not just this idea of building a healthy engineering department, but working in this language that he really loved. And I've talked to a lot of developers, but I have not seen the kind of passion and energy and an excitement that comes from this community ever. And that drew me in. I'm like, I want to test software for people that care that much. So that's my Elixir story.
So the follow-up question here is, how much do you think empathy has to do with creating this excitement, this love, and this passion, which we often see in the community?
It's so much. Because every action that y'all take as developers in the Erlang and Elixir community changes the community. It's a small enough, tight enough group of people that your actions have a direct impact on the person sitting next to you. The things you're building, the things you're creating are being used by people that are real. Like, this community is creating this software, this language together. And that is incredible. And it's made me, honestly, I've started trying to learn Elixir. It's not going well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.